I'm sure you've seen this. You have a website that looks great on a large screen, but when the screen gets smaller as it would on a mobile device, the actual design starts to degrade and not look as good or become completely unreadable as this one kind of does as we get smaller.
This video is brought to you by OppiPies Academy.
Just starts to look weird, the text is not the right size, things overlap, and that's because the design really was meant for a larger screen and no adjustments have been made for smaller screen viewing. And that's generally where responsive design comes in. This concept that you can create a design that adjusts itself based on the size of the screen. Let's take a look using the developer tools. In Chrome, the developer tools have a neat feature which lets us simulate the screen on a number of mobile devices. So I've opened up my developer tools, and if you see where my mouse pointer is pointing, it's this toggle device mode icon. I'm going to toggle device mode, and I'm going to select a Apple iPhone 5. And notice on the iPhone 5, already we have problems with the way this particular website looks. Just not particularly readable unless you do some side scrolling, which is never advantageous. We could take a look through a simulated Android device too. Let's take a look at, let's do a Galaxy S4. So here just it becomes much too small as it tries to accommodate the text to be anywhere near readable on this size screen. So the first thing we can do about that is set the magnification and the screen size using a viewport meta tag. I've got the code right here for this particular document. And what I'm going to do is here in the head section of the document, I'm going to set the meta tag. And this is read by the browser. And the browser sees, okay, this is a viewport meta tag, so I'm trying to set the size of the viewport. The viewport is the visible part of the screen, the part of the screen where the content can be displayed. So this is a setting for the viewport, and I'm going to make two settings here. In the content attribute, the first is setting the width. Now, we could set this to a specific width, but since we don't know the width that the user is going to be looking at our content through, right? We don't know how wide their screen is. We're going to set it to device width, which essentially means the width of whatever device is reading this HTML. And then I'm going to set the initial scale to 1, which means 100%. So we're going to set the size to 100% to keep it readable, because some, especially older mobile devices, used to try and like zoom out and show you the entire page, which made it more or less unreadable. So this is setting us up to do a responsive design that will be better optimized for a mobile phone. All right, even with that, now there's a change here in that we're displaying everything at 100%. We're still not where we need to be. It's still not readable, but we've set everything up at 100%. So the screen is, the screen size is what it should be. Let me take a look at that. Let's use the iPhone 5 simulation here. And again, you see the 100%, but we still got to make some adjustments to the CSS in order to make this readable on the smaller phone-sized screen. Essentially, what I'm going to do here in the CSS is add a section of the CSS that's targeted towards mobile devices. And I do that with what's called a media query. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my CSS, and here at the end, I'm going to set up my media query. We do that with the @ and the word media, and we're targeting screen-based media, and we're going to set a minimum device width of, let's say, 320 pixels. And let's also set a maximum device width of 480 pixels. So essentially, we're going to make some media decisions here, some decisions about how our media appears on screens between 320 pixels wide and 480 pixels wide. If we're outside of that, all the standard CSS will apply. So we're going to override the CSS there. And what I'm going to do for right now is on screens like this is I'm simply going to make the image disappear. So this image right here, I'm going to take that, and let's say I decide that's not critical. So at these widths, we're going to make the image disappear. So instead of the width 200 border solid black, we're simply going to set the display setting to none. Let's test this to make sure our query is correct. For media on the screen with a minimum device width of 320 pixels and a maximum device width of 480 pixels. Let's make sure our document is saved, and let's take a look in the browser. All right, so let's go into our developers tools again. And let me turn on that screen emulation and refresh. And if we scroll down, you'll notice the image has disappeared. If we look at a larger screen, let's say like on a Google Nexus 10, and refresh, the image is back. So we've been able to make adjustments here just on the image for the document to accommodate smaller screens. But that's not the only adjustment I want to make. We want to get rid of the floating columns. So on primary, secondary, and more secondary, I'm going to get rid of the floats. So for primary, secondary, and more secondary, probably not the greatest name for a div ever, I'm going to get rid of the floats because you can see that we have the floats here, primary, secondary, and more secondary. So I'm simply going to set the float to none. I'm also going to set the width to 100% of the parent. Float none with 100%. So essentially everything is going to appear in one giant continuous column, which is really better for mobile devices. Since you have limited screen space, it allows everything to go all the way across. All right, let's go ahead and save that. And then let's take a look at how it appears in our mobile browser simulation. Okay, so here in the Nexus 10, no effect, right? Because it's 1280 pixels across. Let's go to an iPhone 5 and refresh, and let's take a look. So now the image has disappeared, and our stories appear very, very readable on the actual screen. And that's because we've taken away the floats. We may want to make other adjustments as well, but these are the basic ones, getting rid of the floats. We made the image disappear. Now, by the way, we don't have to make the image disappear entirely. We could have, instead of having the image take up a, where was it? Somewhere up here, a width of 200 pixels. We could have said, hey, take that in half. So let's just change this again. And instead of having the image totally disappear, let's say we still want the image, but we obviously don't want it to take up so much space. So let's go with 100 pixels and a margin of 3. So now the image still appears where it did in the story, but it takes up less space. So we've optimized our actual document now for viewing on a small phone. Let's try an iPhone 4, which is even smaller, and it seems to work just as well. So the technique is responsive design and can make your content display more friendly on smaller mobile devices.